Hey, it's Tim here. In today's video, it's another Friday, so we're back with some Friday thoughts. Now, today's topic is a bit of a different one. I want to talk about what is changing at Tableau. Now, I have to say up front, this is just an opinion piece. It's not, there's no facts behind this. I haven't sat down with the CEO and sort of gone through all these topics. Although if you're up for that, I'd love to do that. Nonetheless, I've just basically, been in the Tableau community for the last 7 years. I've been sort of heavily embedded in it in the last couple of years. I actually sort of, pulled a finger out and started making content. And so what I wanted to do is just sort of try and unpick, I think, a problem. And it's a problem that's not often spoken about in the community. And it's actually starting to cause a bit of friction, generally speaking. And when I talk about community, I just don't mean the Tableau community. I'm talking about Tableau partners, Tableau customers. Everyone who touches Tableau in some way or form is going to experience some sort of friction in this change that I'm about to talk about. Okay. Now, the thing that really hit me a couple of days ago is I came across a quote, and I've got it up on the screen here to the left. And the quote goes something like this: "You're only as young as the last time you changed your mind." And that's a quote from a chap called Timothy Leary. And it sort of hit me really hard when I came across it. It was actually through a show on Netflix. And then I ended up finding out that it wasn't original. It was by, someone else. And this person is Timothy Leary. Nevertheless, it hit me really hard because what this quote was really sort of, I think, trying to get across is, listen, it's really important not to get stuck in your ways, not to sort of be stuck in sort of neurotic ways and habits, and to be constantly challenging yourself to evolve and change. And I feel like this really rings home with the way Tableau's been sort of pushing its focus over the last years. And so in order to explain this context, I think first we have to maybe do a little bit of a history lesson. And again, this is an opinion piece, so some of this history might be wrong, factually incorrect, but nonetheless, it's how I see things changing, and so it is what it is. Now, on my screen, we've got my iPad. I've actually got my pencil out. We're going to do some drawing. We're going to have a slightly sort of more intimate session today. And I'm going to draw a few things, and I'm going to just try and explain the context, where Tableau came from, and where it's heading as I see it, okay? So I'm going to draw a line first. I'm going to just do this down the middle. And this I consider the big divide between on-premise and cloud. Okay. And for those of you who are not sort of familiar, when you talk about on-premise and cloud, on-premise essentially means running, your software, your systems in your own building, in your own sort of infrastructure, essentially. So if I was to take Tableau Server, for example, you run Tableau Server on-premise, but Tableau Online runs in the cloud. And so the key thing here is that Tableau was born into a particular world, and it was actually a product developed and conceptualized in the on-premise world. So initially you had Tableau Desktop, so I'll just say D for desktop. Actually, I'll just write it out. It's probably easier. Okay. And then we had Tableau Server, which followed very quickly after. And both of these came out first as an on-premise software. And what has happened over the years is actually the transition has started to head the other way. Now, if we think about the companies that we know about today, there's actually two ways of running cloud infrastructure. Apparently my sleep time has come on there, so probably a funny note there. I should probably head to sleep. That gives you a note how late I record these, but nevertheless, there's probably a split when it comes to cloud infrastructure. Now, I'm just going to highlight the two that I think matter in this context, and that is first, cloud as infrastructure. I'm just going to call that infrastructure. Really sorry about my spelling. It's awful, but that's the way it is. And then you've got software as a service. So I'll acronym that as SaaS. It's SaaS, if that makes sense. So SaaS, companies like Salesforce are like the king of SaaS. Basically, you just get access to an application over the web, and they're using the web as a way of delivering a product to you. And what actually commonly happens, if we just draw another small line here, is that a lot of SaaS companies tend to rely on infrastructure cloud providers. So if I just sort of draw a line here, some of those people on the left-hand side might be AWS, might be Google. If I just type that in, might be Azure from Microsoft. Okay. And all these people are sort of here on the left-hand side. Okay. and they run pretty much everything. They let you run everything as close to the metal as it's possible. They let you install pretty much anything you want on any hardware you want at any time at a whole range of prices. And that's what's made those companies really successful. SaaS companies, on the other hand, have sort of taken advantage of that technology, and they've built systems and software on top of that. And it's allowed them to build software at scales never seen before. So if you take Salesforce, for example, they build an absolutely huge platform, the Salesforce platform. And that's built on top of AWS. And so these guys are sort of building applications, okay? And those applications do a whole plethora of things. So I'll put Salesforce here. I'll just put SF for Salesforce. But essentially, so many services we use today are actually very much like this. If you take YouTube as an example, there's no desktop app for YouTube. There's simply a browser. So in many ways, that's a SaaS-based video player, okay? Everything is done through the internet. You go to a website, you play it, and you experience everything on the platform in that sort of mechanism. Now, Salesforce has built its entire platform pretty much in the SaaS model. So there's not really a time where, as a Salesforce admin, you have to worry about things like server specs and all that kind of stuff. So everything is sort of very, very simplified in the SaaS world. It's essentially the customer just gets access to something via login. And once they get access, they can start adding their users. And Salesforce, in this particular instance, take care of everything else, okay? Whereas if you're going to run Tableau server, say on AWS, you still have to worry about what specs you're going to run, all of that kind of stuff, and then put it on there. Now, let's get back to Tableau, because what Tableau have done in the most recent years is they've actually been trying to, if I just sort of take a different color, I'll just take a blue color here, they've actually been trying to go over to this world, okay? And so this company, born in the desktop and on-premise era, is sort of been slowly transitioning itself over to the cloud. And that's been accelerated even more by the fact they're now owned by Salesforce. So Salesforce acquired Tableau just probably over 2 years ago. And so this, I feel, has actually accelerated that change in sort of order for Tableau to integrate itself with the Salesforce platform. It has to natively be cloud ready. And so there's been an interesting sort of shift, and this shift has slowly been happening. Okay, let's go back to the previous color pen, whatever that was. Now, if we look at desktop is still predominantly an authoring experience, and therefore it's still predominantly, it runs best on a desktop, it runs best on a machine. The web edit experience, web authoring experience is catching up, but nonetheless, it's still a mostly on-premise piece of software. Now, Tableau Server, on the other hand, has actually had another part of it, which is Tableau Online. So Tableau Server is essentially a piece of software. You install it, you run it on your own servers on-premise or in the cloud. And then once you've basically set it up, you're responsible for managing the infrastructure. Tableau Online, however, has actually been a very interesting addition, because it was added now, I think, 5 years ago, and it sort of sits firmly in this space. Okay, so Tableau Online sits firmly over in the SaaS side. So if I just keep drawing a line, this is an awful diagram, but nevertheless, this is what we're going to do. Online sits firmly on this side. And so the problem we have here is that we've actually got a company that's transitioning. It has some of its products in the SaaS world. It has a large legacy in the on-premise world, and it's desperately trying to shift from one side to the other. The reason I say desperately is because if you look at all the features that Tableau are focusing their energy on, a lot of the sort of design constraints that you'd typically give to an architect to build something tend to focus and assume that you're running this stuff in a cloud environment. So in the olden days, whenever you added a new feature, the first thing a server admin would ask is, how much resources is that going to use? That's a classic question. If you're on a core license, you're still asking that question. And if you've, still running Tableau Server on premise, that is probably what your server admin is focused on. What is my backgrounder going to be doing? How much resources is it going to be using? And where is all my sort of compute time going to be going? And if you're running this in a server cluster, you're probably sharing that with, other resources. So you do care about these stuff because, at a high level, you care about the cost of running all your infrastructure and making sure it's as cost effective as possible. However, if you're running on Tableau Online, you just don't ask that question. You get a flat price per person on a subscription basis. And whenever Tableau adds a feature, what you care about is, does it work and will it sort of serve the needs that I have? Now, Tableau Online does have some limits, but those limits are pretty hard to reach. I'll maybe put a link to them on the screen right now. And so it's really been fascinating in the last year to see Tableau add more and more features that really assume that most companies are running their Tableau servers in a cloud infrastructure sort of setup, because Tableau Online itself runs in a cloud setup. Now, the last thing I want to emphasize here is that as we move to a world where Tableau is also trying to serve a new audience, it's so much easier for them to serve that audience if they have a SaaS offering. Because the benefit of having a SaaS offering is essentially all your customers are operating on your platform. Let's say you have Tableau Online deployed at one company and you have Tableau Online deployed at another company. They're all essentially running on the same hardware. And because of that, you get to see how it's being used. You can optimize it. You can optimize the resources for the things it does the most at the times it does it. And I know Tableau Online runs on AWS, so they are able to scale these things up and down. It runs across borders. And it's a really fascinating sort of problem to have, because we're now starting to see features that squarely place themselves in the world of Tableau Online. Because if you try and sort of deploy all these wonderful features on Tableau server, the thing you're going to keep asking yourself is, how many resources are these being used? And so we're not talking about, processes that are going to be running, tons of backgrounders doing tons of things at a time. But it's interesting to see the incremental shifts that are being made feature release after feature release. And then the other thing is, obviously, Tableau is pushed to the browser. Now, this is a really interesting thing, because an on-premise company has to sort of deal with two problems. The first is getting the software past IT and government. The second is actually selling the software, so you have to convince someone to buy it. The third thing is getting people to try it, adoption. It's very, very difficult to actually make sure that once someone has bought it and they've agreed to, deploy it, to actually deploy it takes time. And then to actually give people the license key so they get access to the thing they've paid for also takes time. So that is a massive chunk of resource that Tableau don't want to keep spending time, wasting time sort of getting into. And so again, the on-premise world poses a real challenge. It makes much more sense if, let's say, when your company gives you access to Tableau, they simply send you a link, you log in via email, and boom, you've got access to everything you need. An editing experience, an authoring experience, a sharing experience, and even a data prep experience, all delivered through the browser. It just cuts out so many middlemen. And it also allows people to try the product. And it also allows Tableau to offer some sort of metrics back to users. So one of the problems you have with adoption is that it's really hard to see who's actually using it and how they're working. And in an on-premise world, that data is very hard to sort of get hold of, because essentially, Tableau have sort of got to ask you to send over your logs and give you sort of things like status reports and workbooks to pull this stuff out of Postgres and analyze it. It's just a lot of effort. And Tableau Online, the world is very different. They actually get to see this. They can see it at a pretty granular level. Although they can't see the data that you're looking at, they can see sort of the behaviors, who's logging in, when they're logging in, how much of their license estate are they using, and then they can use this information to better serve customers. So if a customer goes up to Tableau and say, hey, we're not really enjoying this feature, it's not really doing the thing for us, Tableau can probably better diagnose why, because they can actually see the back-end metrics of what's going on. So we've got a company that is desperately trying to move from the on-premise world to the SaaS world. And the problems now start to arise because a large part of their customer base has actually existed in the legacy world. So what I want to do now is talk about the impact that this change has. And I'm going to go back to the quote that I started this video with at the very end. I just want you to keep that in mind because I think it is an important quote, and we'll get back to it a little later on. So the last thing I want to do is just go through each of the products and just show you how they're shifting to this SaaS world. So first of all, let's start with desktop. We've got web authoring that is catching on pace. It's actually been catching on for a while, but it's quickly adding features. Almost every release, there is a web authoring edition. And the biggest hurdle at the moment is formatting. Sort of really bespoke formatting is still quite difficult, but in the last year, it's actually sort of come along a really, really long way. You can do a lot of things. You can start your experience in web authoring and finish it in desktop now. You can sort of make content in both places. You can edit content in both places. It's really, really come a long way. Of course, the issue is that we've all got the experience of desktop that's nice and crispy. So that is the standard they have to match when they deliver web authoring. It has to really match the experience that you're seeing. In fact, it has to do more than that. It has to be a better experience. When you start doing things through the browser, people have a higher standard of what they expect because, of course, we all spend time on the internet, and the companies that set the standard are companies like Apple, Google, Facebook, Microsoft. And so that's the standard we sort of expect, okay? And I have to say, Salesforce is not at that standard yet. The Salesforce interface can sometimes feel like it was built in 1996 and can sometimes feel like it's super clunky. So in many ways, Tableau is probably ahead of the curve on this one, but they still have to meet that standard, okay? So desktop is slowly transitioning to the web authoring experience. We've also got Tableau Prep. Now, Tableau Prep was interesting because it was actually built as a web application. It uses this technology called Electron. Essentially means that it's been built using web technology and then packaged to behave like a desktop application. So although it launched as a desktop application, it was actually packaged using web technology, and it was built using web technology. And that's why it was one of the first products to go fully web authoring when that was launched. And that's why it probably feels native in the browser in the same way that it sort of works on desktop. Now, it's sort of been encumbered by growing pains because it's a new product. They're slowly catching up with the feature list that they need to catch up with to make it the product that people wanted to use. But it's very much well on its way this way. And it started in the desktop sort of experience, but I'd actually firmly, if I go back a couple of steps, I'd actually firmly put Tableau Prep over here on the SaaS side because it's actually been predominantly designed in that world, and so it works in that world. And today it does have a pretty comparable web authoring experience that is matching the desktop experience because it's a web app. Okay, now we've got desktop, which is well on its way to the left. It's not there yet, still has some way to go. Tableau Online is already over here on the left, which just leaves server here on the right hand side. Now there's a bunch of other products, things like Tableau Mobile. They sort of, live in a different world. They live in sort of the app development world. And that's always different because, application frameworks change on a day-to-day basis. But if we look at other things, if we start to look at things like the developer APIs, the technologies that Tableau have made available to use on their platform, they've actually been slowly, incrementally adding these to enable Tableau to talk to other technologies. Right before Salesforce acquired Tableau, there was a real big push to things like extensions, galleries for different types of connections. And more recently, we're seeing this sort of accelerate. And actually, Tableau is using some of this technology to build its own internal features. And so, again, if we look at things like APIs and developer sort of access, well, that again is actually very much sort of living in this world. I'm going to put it there because it's very new stuff, and it is designed to sort of meet this more web-centric audience, more developer-centric audience who do run more in this sort of software as a service setup. A good example is embedding, for example. If you're going to embed Tableau in a platform, you're typically going to be embedding it in what's considered a SaaS platform because you're not asking someone to install the Tableau server and set it all up. All you're doing is you're setting up the environment. You're going to install that stuff in your own infrastructure, and you're just going to set that up and then sell that experience to someone else through a username and a login. So again, the APIs, all the developer things sort of squarely sit here in the SaaS world. Okay. So when we look at the Tableau of today, there's really not much left of its old heritage. Now, of course, this is not really the case because, of course, there's still a lot of people that use desktop, that use server. And so I think what's really interesting is how this transition is going to change the relationship that Tableau has with all of its stakeholders. So enough sort of rambling on from me. Let's talk a little bit about the change that's going to be happening and how I think it impacts different groups. Okay. The main groups we're going to talk about are customers, the partners that work with Tableau, whether they're technology partners or partners that help sell the product, resellers, and then lastly the community, the people who love the products, go to conference and so on and so forth. So first, let's start with customers. Well, the interesting thing is customers buy Tableau all the time, and one of the interesting shifts is the longest serving customers have typically come from this on-premise world. You get a piece of software, you install it, and you're happy, and it does everything you want it to do. Those customers have sort of been educated that, when a new version of Tableau, they get everything at once. And so in the last few years, that hasn't sort of been quite the case, and Tableau started to add new pricing tiers, new add-ons, new plugins, and that's sort of been a real challenge for some customers, especially the addition more recently of Einstein Analytics, which has completely knocked the top off all the pricing that you normally get for add-ons. Most of the pricing add-ons are, in the $5-10 mark. And then this one comes in and it's like $25 per user, even if they're not using, the particular features. It's just basically the number of users that are actually on the server are what this is priced at. I'll put it up on the screen. And so it's super fascinating to see this sort of transition. Now, that said, Tableau has also been acquired by Salesforce. So there's also a whole new swathe of customers that are kind of used to this way of pricing, used to this behavior. So on one hand, you've got a big group of customers who are sort of starting to get itchy feet about the way that Tableau is managing its pricing and how it's going. And on the other hand, you've also got, competitors like Power BI seizing this moment, changing their pricing models, going in real hard on certain pitches, and sort of seizing this opportunity, this sort of disruption to make new products and also approach customers that have typically been using Tableau and shifting them away from Tableau to their platforms. Of course, Microsoft have the advantage of something like Azure, so they can sort of bundle Power BI and all these other tools very easily without really the customer noticing how they've moved the sort of pricing models around to sort of get that customer on board. Now, the final thing is customers will come and go. It's actually very easy in a SaaS world to drop a tool. What starts to become really hard is once you've heavily invested in it, the exit costs start to outweigh the benefits of any new platform that might come in. And so the really difficult thing for Tableau now with their customers is holding on to them during this transition. That's actually the biggest key factor here. If Tableau can sort of successfully navigate this and keep their customers, and not only that, gain new customers, then they'll start to get this sort of annoying effect in enterprise technology where you have lock-in, where it becomes sort of prohibitive to leave because you've invested so much energy and time into the infrastructure and into the sort of ecosystem that to sort of pull yourself away from it becomes really hard. Okay, so that's sort of the big challenge for customers. Now, the other big challenge is, people who work with Tableau. I think this is probably a more interesting field for me personally because, as a consultant, as a member of the community, the key thing that really changes here is relationships. The relationships we have with Tableau, whether it's personal relationships, people we talk to, people we know in the company, all the way to the relationships we have with things like product development, sort of the more abstract side of the relationship model. That becomes a little bit more tricky because it's really still not clear how those things are going to land. And that's sort of where a lot of the uncertainty is sort of happening. Whilst it's clear that Tableau has been acquired by Salesforce, I feel like we're still really waiting to see the real impacts of this. Maybe internally at Tableau, people have seen this impact, but I feel like outside, as partners, as consultants, as people who work with Tableau, who go to things like certifications and events and stuff, we're still just starting to see the change sort of take effect. And so it's really important over the next 2 to 3 years to just watch how that relationship changes, whether Salesforce has a big impact on that relationship, and also whether the Salesforce community makes a move into the Tableau community as well. That's also a really important dynamic where we see people who've had really strong relationships with Salesforce sort of move into the Tableau space as well. Or will it be vice versa? Will people with good Tableau relationships move closer to Salesforce? That's always an interesting sort of dynamic to look out for. Now, the final one is the impact on the community at large. And when I talk about community, I just mean everyone who loves the product, everyone who champions the product, everyone who uses the product. And essentially, this also includes customers because the community is not about customers. The community is actually about the energy and the ethos around the people that use the product. I always say this to a lot of people, which is the people who buy Tableau don't necessarily use Tableau. Okay. The people who make the decision to buy the really big deployments of Tableau probably never have to open the product in their lives. And whilst many will do that, I think it's a good thing to do that, to see a demo, to see it working. When it actually comes to deploying it, it's actually the people on the ground who do the heavy lifting with these platforms. And so it's very important to understand when we talk about community, we're largely talking about people who are just involved in the ecosystem, people who've been told that the company is getting Tableau, start learning it, get involved, go to some user groups, learn it, get certified. Those are the members of the community. And I think the tough thing for the community going forward is basically the quote I said at the beginning. Okay. And let me repeat that quote. It's essentially, you're only as young as the last time you changed your mind. Okay. That's a quote by Timothy Leary. And I think that's super important because we're at this really important junction. Okay. And we do need to sort of get out of our old habits and start to reevaluate the product again, almost relearn Tableau. It's really, really important because as this relationship changes, there's two fundamental questions. Is Tableau heading in a direction that, suits me as an individual? Is Tableau continuing to give me the product that I want to use and love and enjoy using, that I can shout about from the rooftops as a proud community member? And those are two questions that I think some people are starting to have this challenge and sort of realize, actually, in some places it is, and in some places it's not. And if we sort of don't monitor that transition and we don't sort of proactively, open ourselves to change as well, at the end of the day, we have to sort of be explicit and understand that the product might go in a direction we don't like, but it might help other people who are not yet part of the analytics and data viz community. And so for the good of the community, it actually might be better if, let's say, Tableau focus less on authors and creators and more on analysts, people who use the reports, in helping them use the product. And so that to me is the friction point. Release after release, more recently, we're seeing more features that are pitched, I'm going to say, at the analyst. And I think that is where we have to start opening our minds to change. We have to sort of start thinking and evolving our thinking. It makes sense for Tableau to move in this direction. It has to keep evolving. It has to keep learning. And they do have to keep trying new things. It's a dog-eat-dog world out there. Licenses don't sell themselves. And if they're going to continue to make a product we love, they need to get money and they need to be paid to do it. But in order to do that, they are going to have to disappoint some of their existing customers. And I think we as users, we as community members have to be prepared for that. And we just have to accept it in some cases. Okay. And then we have to sort of evaluate whether we want to start using other tools that are maybe cheaper, better, easier, whatever. If something comes along that is better, then we also have to be open that, Tableau maybe not be doing what we want. But likewise, Tableau also have to step up to the challenge, and they have to sort of prove to us that they're going to continue to earn the right to call us members of their community, because that doesn't come for free. They have to make a good product. We have to love it. And at the end of the day, we have to love it so much that we tell everyone else to use it. And that's, one of the reasons I make videos, because I love the product. And if I stop having that passion, I'll stop making the videos and I'll stop helping people learn how to use it. And that's, my friend, is how a community dies. Okay. So, man, I think I've probably rambled way too long for this video, but hopefully I've maybe scratched the surface on trying to explain what's changing, why it's changing, and how it might impact you as a community member or as someone who's worked with Tableau in the past. Okay. Thanks for watching. I might even have to re-record this, but who knows? You'll never know how many takes of this I did, but hopefully you've enjoyed this video, and I'll catch you in the next one.